I'm Will Andrews, head of product. We've got Vishall Doshi, our head of analytics, who is going to speak to us about AI and Gigasheet. And we've got Steve Schohn, who is going to talk about our head of tech solutions, who's going to walk us through a demo of using AI for ad hoc data exploration. So I will start us off by walking through a little bit about Gigasheet for those of you who aren't familiar with our company. So Gigasheet was founded on the idea of democratizing big data. We want everyone to be data analysts. Not everyone is, and current tools require technical skills. And that puts a reliance on IT and data teams because not everyone can use SQL or manage databases. And honestly, not everyone should have to. That's what we believe at Gigasheet. Even if you think about tools for big data and SQL, it's not the best thing for doing ad hoc data exploration. So if you think about a pivot table or aggregations, it can be quite cumbersome to do. And we believe that Gigasheet is an easy tool for exploring big data. So we believe they shouldn't have to. So we invented this. We're going to walk through a full demo later of our product, but what you see here is just taking a set of data and quickly aggregating it the way you would sort of in a pivot table in a spreadsheet and getting down to row level detail. And the best thing about Gigasheet is that it allows for self-service in an intuitive spreadsheet-like interface. Popular tool, if you talk to a business user, they're like, they want to open a file in Excel or Google Sheets, right? They just give me the data, I'll put it in Excel, I'll do a pivot, I'll poke around. Well, unfortunately, those tools are limited at about 1 million rows or 10 million cells for Google Sheets. So you can't work with big data in a way that our business users are comfortable with. And oftentimes a data team will allow users access to dashboards, something like Power BI, where they've got a dashboard. The boss will ask them a question, and they're like, "Okay, I'll go dive into the data," but they can't because there's big data underneath. They can't access it in Excel. So what they really need is the ability to access the data with row level detail, and that is what we believe is the Gigasheet difference. It's perfect for ad hoc analysis. It has live integrations to Snowflake, Databricks, MySQL, PostgreSQL, other data warehouses. It's basically if you have a big data store, we can connect to it and provide a front end for easy exploration and ad hoc analysis. And the other thing that is great is it's got actual control of the data by your IT team. So this is not copies of data, it's access to the live data. And we have AI solutions, which Vishal is going to talk about here in a minute, and Steve's going to show you. So users can really go in and just chat with our sheet assistant and get answers. We have 150,000 users globally of our Gigasheet solution. We have not trained any of them. They've just been able to figure out how to explore data and use it. We make big data spreadsheet easy, is what we like to say. We have set up data automations and customizations for our clients. That's the Steve Schohn experience. So we're happy to talk to you about how we can make your data flows easier and enable your Gigasheet users. But as far as using the product goes, it's very, very straightforward and very self-explanatory. And like I was mentioning a minute ago, business users love it because they get the real level detail. If you talk to a business user, they're going to say, just give me the data. Like I don't want your dashboard. I understand the dashboard, but I've got to go answer a question. In the past, maybe they've been able to convince an IT team to give them a copy or a download of data, but that's going to create an island of data, right? They're going to go do their analysis. They're going to report it back. It's not refreshable. Do you really trust it if you're in leadership? And what we'd like instead is a way for us to just give them the data that they can show someone else their work. It's refreshable, it's repeatable, it can become part of a decision-making process. So that's Gigasheet is the way that we give someone the data the right way. And for your IT team, there's nothing to install and there's no code to write. It is spreadsheet easy. I mentioned data warehouse integration. We'll get to the AI here in a second. Let me just cover this. We do work with, like I said, all types of data warehouses, databases. We have multiple ways to connect. We can sync data to Gigasheet on a schedule so that you can, data can be live every so often, or we have what we call our live mode where you can literally query your data warehouse. This does following your data retention policies that you've set up for users. So the marketing user can have access to just the information the marketing should see. Finance can have their transactional data, and it will use your data retention policies. We also have audit log capabilities, and you can track all activity that happens in Gigasheet. So enough about just data warehouses and Gigasheet. Let's talk about AI, which is the topic of today's webinar. So Vishal, you want to take us through our AI approach?
Yeah, can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, thanks, Will. As Will mentioned, my name is Vishall Doshi. I'm Gigasheet's head of analytics and AI. So I'm going to give a quick overview of the design philosophy behind our AI capabilities, and then I'll turn it over to Steve so you could see it live. Um, so I've been a practitioner in this space as an analyst, as a data scientist, as well as a developer, and also a leader on the receiving side of this analysis. And a lot of these principles come from that experience in mind in terms of what would have made my life easier in that role, in that job. I'll get a little more detailed. So one of our goals in building the capabilities that we're going to show today, as well as guiding our future development, is to enable you to go from data to decisions as efficiently as possible. So that means spending less time on preparing your data for analysis and more time analyzing it. Will talked about how you would need to potentially construct complex SQL or even complex Excel formulas, as I'm sure many of you do, to do the analysis you need. But with our AI capabilities and using LLMs, you could interact via natural language. And what's really powerful about the LLMs in general is that they have a model of the world that you can interact with that underlies the interaction. So a quick example is, let's say you're looking at a data set and it's in the healthcare space and you want to know, you want to filter it to only include, the top 5 states, the US states. But let's say you want it to be the top 5 US states, not by population, but by the number of Medicare beneficiaries. So that list might look different, and you could go on a 30-minute, hour-long research project to dig up the data to find what that top 5 list is, or you could just ask the LLM, and you'll get an answer back, and it'll set up the filters for you, and you could just go on your merry way. And depending on what you need for your analysis, that might be good enough. But the LLMs, they're not perfect, but they could be a powerful accelerator. So that brings me to kind of the second piece of second principle in terms of our AI capabilities. You can check the work that the AI does very quickly, very easily. So this is the trust but verify principle. It's the idea that the assistant, the sheet assistant that you interact with, has access to the same APIs and interfaces that our users do. So it's not doing anything magical behind the scenes to give you your results. It functions as your agent, able to take actions on your behalf, like creating filters, grouping, sorting, writing formulas, augmenting your data in various ways, and then analyzing the resulting data sets. And after it takes those actions, it will summarize exactly what it did for you so you can review it. And you can review it in a way that allows you to quickly modify. So if it tells you it made a filter to, Ohio, but you see no results in your data set, maybe you could quickly click on the interaction, see that, oh, well, my data has state codes and not state names. So that's why this filter resulted in no data sets. And you could quickly correct it and kind of move on to the analysis instead of spending a bunch of time um, uh, doing extra research to get your job done. So finally, the last point I want to make is that this AI will work at Gigasheet scale. So Will talked about how we can handle billions of rows of data, significantly more than what you could do in Excel or Google Sheets. And the Sheet Assistant is designed to work at that scale. And so it will work with data in your warehouses, or if you upload, a multi-gigabyte file to Gigasheet. And it does this by using, a limited but very carefully constructed context window. Not to get into too many AI technical details, but that allow the LLM to provide an answer to your question without having to replicate your entire data set, right? And so that means, like Will said, if your IT team says your data needs to stay in Snowflake, you could still interact with it using natural language in Gigasheet without your data having to leave Snowflake. So one additional note before I hand it over to Steve, um, just in terms of what's coming up for us, that I'm pretty excited about is going beyond the sheet. So right now, the AI works on the sheets that you upload, but we have plans. We've heard feedback that it would be pretty amazing for you to bring in a collection of data sets and be able to work across them all with natural language. So let me turn it over to Steve now, and happy to take questions at the end.
Cool. All right, let me share my screen here. And I promise that if this Purdue High Point game gets exciting, I'll let everybody know. But for now, we're going to start at the Gigasheet getting data in stage where we connect to various platforms. So what you see are the different places where data ends up in an enterprise these days. It ends up in CRMs like Salesforce and HubSpot. It ends up in data repositories like Databricks and Snowflake. It ends up in various databases like MySQL and Postgres, and on and on. You see all these different ways data can get into a platform. And each of these are great, and each of these have a reason to put data into those. But each of these also make it very hard to query, make it very hard to, use the special query language to get the data out of that you care about out of Databricks or out of LiveQuery or out of Athena. I say that with no shade. I used to work for a big data company that had its own special query language. This is the world we live in. But the world we live in also is business analysts don't want to learn 18 different ways to query data. They just want to work in spreadsheets. So what Gigasheet does, I've got a Snowflake instance here. And so in Snowflake, I've got, this GG test object, and underneath it is this public schema. And underneath that are these various tables. And underneath that are each table. I can click on any one of them, and I can see, 80.5 million rows in the various columns. But if I want to work with this data, I either have to know SQL or hope it's in the first 100 rows so I can preview it in a way that's easy for me. And, 80.5 million rows, the data I care about is probably not in the first 100. So what Gigasheet does using these connectors is it allows you to make a live query connection to Snowflake. So here I am in my Snowflake live query, and I was in as data viewer. I can go into that same warehouse. I can go into that GG test. It was public. I can go into those same tables, and I see that transactions table, those 80.5 million rows, and I can open that, excuse me, and I will see those 80.5 million rows. Now I have full access to work with this like it is a spreadsheet. And so with that ability to connect to any and all of those various data repositories, now there's sort of this common language infrastructure set up that I can query all of this different data in all of these different systems with a simple business-friendly interface. I've got another table here that I pulled in from Snowflake. This was originally one of those health insurance MRF files, those machine readable files that health insurance companies put out, and more people are using Gigasheet to analyze. We put a bunch of them in Snowflake and connected to that. And here's what you see. And you see the billing code. This is often called the CPT code, the name, the description, the negotiated type, whether it's the fee of this particular service is a percentage or a fee schedule, or a negotiated rate, the actual price, and so on. We've done some lookups here to get in the Medicare percentage. We looked up their NPI number. Their NPI number is essentially who is this provider? What is it a doctor? Is it a hospital? And so on. And we've also brought in their taxonomy. So is this a cardiologist? Is this an orthopedist? And so on. And what I can do with this data, like I can with any of the data in any of those repositories, is I can use AI to both manipulate the data so that I can get some information out of it, as well as ask questions of the data. And both of them are cool, and both are what I'm going to show you right now. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a formula. Now, there are obviously Excel wonderkins out there who can write super long Excel formulas, in their sleep. And those people are incredibly cool, and I am not one of them. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to use, again, there's this negotiated rate, which is essentially record by record, how much this particular procedure costs at this particular provider. So what I can do is I can say, okay, show me the average rate by the billing code. And what I'm going to say is I'm going to calculate the average negotiated rate by billing code. Let's say round to 2 decimal. Calculate the average negotiated rate by billing code, round to 2 decimals. I'm just going to press generate formula. And the AI writes the formula for me. So it does an average by with a round, puts the parentheses where the parentheses need to go. And I just press here, zoomed in. I just press add column, and this is just going to work. It's going to take about 45 seconds for this to run. Fun fact, someone once told me never press add or apply when you're working with AI on the live demo because you never know what you're going to get. But we're going for it. And we'll see how this goes. So we're going to press add column. It's going to take about 45 seconds. And it's going to calculate essentially, it's going to group in the back end each one of these billing codes and calculate the average negotiated rate. And there we go. Average rate by billing code. So here's billing codes J9264. The average rate is $29.31. From each of these specific negotiated rates, we get this average. We can keep going here, and we could say, okay, let me say rate comparison. And I want to say, if the negotiated rate is more than 200% of the average rate by billing code, return very high. If it's 100 and let's say 10% to 199%, return high. If it's 90% to 110%, return same. It's less than 89%, return low. So what I'm essentially doing is saying, take this negotiated rate now and compare it to the average by billing code and tell me if this one provider doing this procedure, if the cost is very high, high, the same, or low compared to the average rate by billing code. Again, I can press generate formula. This is where Vishal was talking about how we show our work. This is the formula that it writes. Again, something that you probably can do if you're really good with Excel, but why would you if you don't need to? If you don't need to like fight the parentheses, as I always say. And it's basically saying negotiated rate compared to the average rate by billing code and very high, high, same or low. I'm going to press add column. And again, it's going to take like 30 seconds for this to go and compare each average rate by billing code to the negotiated rate in the provider column. And there we go. So we see that on these, it's very high. Like the negotiated rate is $70 and the average rate by billing code is 29.31. On some of these, it's very low, and so on. And this is just very cool. It's a very easy way to work with some data that was otherwise in Snowflake. Otherwise was going to be way too hard to do this kind of comparison, this kind of analysis, um, to get a nice little rubric of these are the highs, these are the sames, these are the lows, these are the very highs, and take it from there. So again, I could just filter down to same using Gigasheet filters, and I could see like it's done its job where the negotiated rate and the average rate by billing code is roughly the same. So I can press reset now, and that's how you make and manipulate data within a Gigasheet sheet using AI. I can also use AI using our sheet assistant to ask questions of this data. I can ask questions to get answers about what's in this data set, not just, create a new column for me. So things I can do is say, using the values in this column I just created, comparison column, of uh, of the records that are very high. Show me the count by description. So when Will was talking earlier about how 150,000 people have trained themselves on Gigasheet, it's doing this. Um, it is taking our ability to just ask questions of your data like this. And I see that, as Vishal was saying, I was expecting a little bit more here in terms of what it did. It seems like it didn't take that rate comparison column that are very high. So I can say add the very high filter, the rate comparison column. This is why I was told never use AI in demos, because you never know what you're going to get. Anyway, so here you go. So I actually got the counts where the filter was applied. So it's this kind of thing, and I can reset the sheet and see specifically, of the ones where it's very high, it's done a nice grouping for me, and it's gotten me a count per procedure. I can continue going here, and I can say, same thing of the records that with a low value in the rate comparison column, show me the procedure description with the fewest entries. And so it'll look through this and it will filter and then group and then count those that have a low billing code compared to the average and show me what it looks like. And so I see, specifically it's hidden 28 fields. It's deemed that I don't need to see those. I can always go back and unhide them if I want them. It has done this filter to the rate comparison equals low for me. It has grouped on the description field, and it is sorted so that it's got this row count. So I can scroll down to the end and see that it's this paclitaxel injection is the procedure, the medical procedure, where there is the fewest number of low rates compared to the average. So these kind of questions that, again, whether that data is in Salesforce, whether that data is in Databricks, whether that data is in BigQuery, whether that data is in Snowflake, bring it into this single platform and interact with it in this single platform and ask questions using natural language AI to get your answers really, really quickly. So with that, I think we can stop the demo and turn it over to questions.
All right, Steve, thank you for that awesome demo. We've got a couple questions here, and feel free to send some more into the chat. Real fast, Steve, I got a question here. Can I save the results from the AI? So, like the AI, you asked a question to the AI, it did something. Can you save that somehow and get back to it?
So when you create that formula, it's going to be saved in your Gigasheet sheet there, and you can also push that data back into your data repository um, as you desire.
I think the intent of the question was more like if, well, let's talk about that too. We'll talk about pushing data back, and like we have another
Okay.
question about that, so that's perfect. But like if in the AI applied a filter in a group, can you save that like the sheet as it is, sort of the way the AI put it, I guess, that you could share that out with other colleagues.
Sure. I mean, in terms of like sharing as a view within Gigasheet, is that what you're getting at? So
Yeah, it
yeah,
sounds like just a view feature.
yeah. So you can save that as a view, which is sort of like a bookmark of your place within your Gigasheet analysis. So you can jump back to the columns and the sorts and the filters that you have applied.
Okay, so now let's touch on that first thing you talked about. We have one that says that IT won't let us edit the warehouse. Does everyone have access to edit the data? And then how can you save the results if you don't have access to edit the data?
So we are going to mirror the data governance that your IT team puts in place. So the in Gigasheet, you'll have both editor users and analyst users. The editors themselves can only see and edit that which they have been given access to by their IT team. And then when they connect Gigasheet to their repository and sync the Gigasheet interface to this data set, they will not be able to edit and manipulate the data, the underlying data. They'll be able to write back new tables in many cases, but they won't be able to edit and delete things out of Databricks or out of Snowflake.
Yep. So the
Uh,
source data is safe, and we do when our enterprise packages can be configured in multiple ways. There's sort of two viewer types. We have editors and analysts, and you just think of it like the menu. Editors have access to functions, formulas, the formulas Steve showed you today. Analysts have a very reduced menu. They can just view data. So the sort of the use case there is that your editors are the ones that put together the analysis. They share it with their boss. Hey, look at these numbers. The boss can log in and look at it, but they can't do anything to the data. And then the data governance piece there, if your organization allows right back to your data warehouse, we don't overwrite the source data. We'll write it off into a separate table, but you can save your work is the goal there. So you say you do a bunch of analysis, you create formulas like Steve showed, you can save it and return to it later. Um,
and one thing I would add is that when you make your connection to Snowflake or Databricks or whatever, you kind of you specify things like your role, your user, and those things your team is set up to be governed on the data warehouse side. And we're not overriding any of those governance things, right? So if that role is not allowed to access something or doesn't have write access to something, it will continue to not have write access to something.
That makes sense. Vishal, question for you. Um, does when calling the LLM, does it send all the data from the data warehouse off to a third party? How does that work underneath the hood?
Yeah, so I maybe described it a bit technically earlier, but no, we don't send your whole data set off to the LM, and it wouldn't work on billion row files if we did, because no context window at an LLM is big enough to do that. So what we do is we generate a careful summary of a view that an analyst might see, and use that to analyze the data, but not replicate the data.
That's great. Steve, another question for you. How would you handle data provided in multiple zip files that are structured uniquely, or different structured files within the zip? Can you combine the files for analysis?
Um, yeah, so absolutely we would be able to take that in. I think that there's a level to which we won't accept nested, zips of zips of zips. But in general, if you have a JSON and a CSV and a Parquet file in one zip file, and you want to bring that in, we will be able to handle each of those individually. And then to your use case, you can either combine them by basically appending from, sheet on to append rows into one primary sheet, or you might want to do more something like horizontal append, like a VLOOKUP, where you're taking values from each and putting in there. But both are very doable. Both are very simple once that data is in Gigasheet.
Steve, another kind of question. Average was used in the aggregation demo, but could you do median, other calculations on aggregations?
Yeah, there's a bunch of functions. Any of the functions that are available in Gigasheet, we would be able to use the AI with. Vishal has built a very impressive AI that works with the entire function set. I don't know if median by is a function. I don't think that would actually uh, median itself is a function, and you'd be able to calculate the median of the entire column for sure. Max, min, um, mode, unique count, percent empty, percent full. Those are all very possible with the UI or with the AI, I should say.
And if the AI, to the second part of your question, if it's not doable, it's not gonna, it will tell you it cannot do it. It will try its best, but if it can't, it can't. And Maria, just reading the rest of, they're all related to the file consolidation. I think we've got resources for this for this workflow exactly. Like it's a very common use case to have a bunch of files come in and us combining them into a single file for easier analysis. So we could probably send that to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if we mentioned at the beginning, but this webinar is being recorded. We'll send out the recording, but please feel free to reach out to us for more individual questions. We can happily follow up and respond to specific use cases. Because, as I mentioned earlier, we see everyone has unique data needs. We get it into the Gigasheet and enable users to do ad hoc exploration. I don't think we have any more questions, so. We will wrap it up and let everyone get to the basketball game. But thank you all for joining, and please reach out, and we'll follow up with you individually. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.